Close your eyes for a moment and think of something that happened to you 10 years ago. A specific morning, a specific conversation, a room you were standing in. And notice how it feels. Notice that it feels like something you can almost touch, specific and located and real in a way that carries weight. And now think about 10 years from now. Think about a morning a decade in the future, and notice how different that feels. Thin and provisional and somehow less than real, more like a sketch than a photograph. And this asymmetry, this profound difference in the felt texture of past and future, is so familiar and so constant that most people never think to question it. Never ask why the two directions of time feel so radically different when the physics of the universe treats them as almost perfectly equivalent. And the question matters because the answer reveals something extraordinary about the relationship between the human mind and the cosmos it inhabits. And verdict 1 is the most foundational and the most disorienting, which is that the laws of physics as we currently understand them are almost entirely symmetric with respect to time, meaning that the fundamental equations governing the behavior of particles and fields and forces work identically whether you run them forward or backward. Newton's laws of motion are time-symmetric. Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism are time-symmetric. Schrödinger's equation in quantum mechanics is time-symmetric, and Einstein's field equations of general relativity express no preference for one direction of time over the other. And what this means is that at the deepest mathematical level of physical description, there is no past and no future. There are only events located at coordinates in a four-dimensional space-time. And the distinction between the direction we call forward and the direction we call backward is not written into the fundamental laws. It is a feature that emerges at larger scales from the statistical behavior of many particles. And yet you feel it with absolute certainty. The past is behind you, fixed and retrievable. The future is ahead, open and uncertain. And the felt difference between these two directions is one of the most powerful and persistent features of conscious experience. And Sagan looked at this asymmetry and saw in it not a trivial fact about neuroscience, but a window into the relationship between mind and universe, a place where the intimate and the cosmic intersect in ways that science is only beginning to map. And verdict 2 is about what memory actually is when you examine it carefully rather than taking it at face value. Because the solidity of the past, the bedrock quality that makes yesterday feel more real than tomorrow, rests almost entirely on the existence of memory. And memory is not what it feels like. It is not a recording, not a photograph, not a faithful archive of what actually happened. It is a reconstruction, an active process of reassembly that happens every time you remember something, drawing on stored fragments and filling in the gaps with inference and expectation, and the current state of your knowledge and beliefs. And the neuroscience of memory has established beyond reasonable doubt that memories are altered by the act of retrieving them. That what you remember is shaped by what you have experienced since. That the confidence with which a memory is held has almost no correlation with its accuracy. And eyewitness testimony, which feels to the witness like direct access to what happened, is among the least reliable forms of evidence in legal proceedings, precisely because the felt solidity of memory is not a measure of its fidelity.
And this does not mean the past is not real. The block universe interpretation of general relativity suggests that the past is in fact permanently and immutably fixed in the geometry of space-time. But it does mean that your felt access to the past through memory is far less direct and far less reliable than the solidity of the feeling suggests. And the past feels more real than the future, not because you have better access to it, but because you have a biological system for representing it that generates a convincing sensation of solidity, whether or not that sensation accurately reflects what happened. And verdict 3 is where physics explains the arrow you feel. Because the one law in all of physics that distinguishes past from future is the second law of thermodynamics, the law that says entropy, the measure of disorder and dispersal of energy in a system, always increases or remains constant, never spontaneously decreases. And this law gives time its direction in the physical world. A broken cup does not reassemble itself. A drop of ink in water does not spontaneously collect back into a drop. Heat does not flow spontaneously from cold objects to hot ones. And the reason is statistical. There are vastly more ways for matter and energy to be arranged in disordered states than in ordered ones. And so any system left to evolve will almost certainly move toward greater disorder, simply because there are so many more disordered configurations to move into. And the arrow of time you feel, the sense that the past is behind
you and the future is ahead, is in essence the arrow of entropy, the direction in which disorder increases in your local region of the universe. And memory exists because entropy increases, because the past leaves traces in the present in the form of records, fossils, photographs, neural patterns, the ash left by a burned match. And the future leaves no traces in the present because the causal direction runs only one way in an entropy-increasing universe. Information flows from past states into future states, but not in reverse. And so the asymmetry you feel between the solid past and the foggy future is not a feature of time itself, but a feature of your thermodynamic situation, of the fact that you are a biological system embedded in a universe that began in an extraordinarily low entropy state and has been moving toward higher entropy ever since. And Sagan found this deeply significant, found that the arrow of time is not a fundamental feature of the cosmos, but an emergent consequence of initial conditions, of the particular way the universe began. And verdict 4 is the one that most directly challenges the felt reality of the future's openness. Because if the block universe interpretation of relativity is correct, and it is the most natural reading of general relativity's mathematics, and is held by many physicists who work on the foundations of the theory, then the future is not open. It is not a space of possibilities waiting to be resolved. It is a set of coordinates in four-dimensional space-time that are as real and as fixed as the coordinates of the past. And the physicist Hermann Weyl described this with unusual clarity when he wrote that the objective world simply is. It does not happen. Only to the gaze of consciousness crawling upward along the lifeline of my body does a section of this world come to life as a fleeting image in space which continuously changes in time. And what Whale was describing is the experience of moving through a static structure, of encountering a future that already exists rather than creating it as you go, and the felt openness of the future, the sense that tomorrow is somehow less determined and less real than yesterday, is on this view an artifact of your position inside the structure, of the fact that your consciousness has access to traces of the past through memory, but no analogous access to the future, not because the future does not exist, but because the causal structure of an entropy-increasing universe does not permit information to flow backward in time from future states to present ones, and the future feels like fog, not because it is not there, but because you are approaching it from behind, moving through the block universe in the direction entropy points. And verdict 5 is the one that brings all of this together into something that changes the way the present moment feels, which is that the asymmetry between past and future that you experience so powerfully and so constantly is your brain's most intimate and most persistent construction, a product of biology and thermodynamics and the particular initial conditions of the universe, rather than a direct perception of something fundamental about time itself. And the past feels more real than the future, not because it is more real in any physical sense, but because your brain has a system for representing the past, the memory system that generates a powerful and convincing sensation of solidity and specificity, and your brain has no analogous system for representing the future with equal vividness, only imagination and anticipation and probability, tools that generate a thinner and less convincing felt experience. And the irony is that the past you feel so solidly is a reconstruction assembled fresh each time you remember it, while the future you feel so tenuously may already exist as immutably fixed coordinates in the geometry of space-time. And on this pale blue dot, this mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam, we are the part of the universe that has developed the remarkable capacity to represent both directions of time, to remember what has been and anticipate what will come, to construct a narrative of self that extends backward through decades of personal history and forward through imagined futures. And this capacity is extraordinary and almost certainly unique among the known configurations of matter in the observable universe. And yet, the way it works, the deep asymmetry between the felt texture of memory and anticipation, is a consequence not of the structure of time itself, but of entropy and thermodynamics, and the way information flows in a universe that began very ordered and has been spreading out ever since. And Sagan believed that understanding this, genuinely understanding it, rather than merely knowing it as a fact, changes the way you inhabit the present moment, because the present is the only place where the past's traces and the future's fixed coordinates meet in a consciousness capable of knowing both. And the present moment is therefore not a thin knife edge between a solid past and an open future, but the only location in space-time where the universe knows what it is, where matter has organized itself into something capable of experiencing the arrow of entropy as the passage of time, and finding in that experience not merely sensation, but meaning. And the past is not more real than the future. They are both coordinates in the same geometry,
and you are moving through that geometry in the direction entropy points, trailing memory behind you and approaching a future that may already be waiting, and the feeling that separates them, the bedrock of yesterday and the fog of tomorrow, is the most intimate thing your brain has ever constructed, and it is telling you something true about your thermodynamic situation, even as it tells you something slightly wrong about the nature of time. Keep looking up. If this video changed the way you think about memory, the future, and what the asymmetry of time actually means, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because the next exploration goes even deeper. And tell us in the comments, does knowing that the future may already exist as fixed coordinates in space-time change the way the present moment feels to you?